I used to think that if I just kept giving, if I poured myself into my son's life long enough, hard enough, and without complaint, then someday he'd look back and say, "Thank you, Mom." Not in a grand way, not with flowers or awards, just one moment of recognition, maybe over coffee or after dinner when the kids were asleep and the house was quiet. But that moment never came, and the silence where it should have been, that was what broke me. I'm Martha Ellison. I'm 74, retired, and for the past 8 years, I've been raising my grandsons like they were my own. My son, Daniel, went through a rough divorce when the boys were just toddlers. He was lost, jobless, emotionally wrecked. So I stepped in, because that's what mothers do. We don't think, we just do. He moved back in with me, kids in tow, and said it would be temporary. That was 3 Christmases, 5 birthdays, and 2 school graduations ago. I took the bottom room, the one with the tiny window and the creaky pipes, so the boys could have their own space. I sold my sewing machine, the one my husband gave me before he passed, just to buy new shoes and school supplies when Daniel's card kept getting declined. I stopped asking for help around the house because every time I did, Daniel would sigh like I was a burden. I paid the electricity bills with my pension, covered groceries, cooked 3 meals a day, ran laundry for 4 people on arthritic knees and a bad hip. Daniel said he was figuring things out. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. Because deep down, every mother wants to think her child is just temporarily lost, not permanently gone. Every month, I put all our bills in a manila envelope, along with cash and receipts, and handed them to Daniel. I told myself I was helping by letting him handle the payments. Maybe he'd feel more responsible that way, but part of me also knew I was just trying to keep him involved, to remind him that this home was something we held together. In April, I added something small to the envelope, just a folded-up lottery ticket from the corner store, $2, quick pick. A joke, really. Something to make us laugh when we were short on money and long on dreams. I didn't expect anything from it. "Could you imagine if we actually won?" I had said to Daniel that morning, smiling. He didn't even look up from his phone. Back then, I still believed there was hope buried under the layers of resentment and silence. I believed that love, real love, could endure being overlooked. I thought maybe, just maybe, Daniel was struggling, but still my son. That belief kept me going. Even when he forgot to say thanks. Even when the kids started calling me Mom more often than he did. Even when he started staying out late, dressing sharper, and looking at me like I was in the way, I made excuses. He's tired? He's got pressure I don't understand. He's still finding his footing. I told myself that a lifetime of sacrifice would eventually matter, that there'd be a payoff, not in money, but in meaning. But meaning doesn't always come. Sometimes all that giving turns invisible. My house, the same one my husband and I bought 42 years ago, became Daniel's launch pad, his second chance. But when people visited, he called it his place. He said he was taking care of the family, and no one corrected him. I didn't either. I just smiled and washed the dishes, like always, because I thought it was fine to disappear a little, to step back, make room, let him shine, until one day I realized I wasn't stepping back. I was being erased. It's funny, isn't it? This isn't a revenge story, at least not the kind people expect, with screaming matches and public scandals. This story is quieter, slower, like the way snow falls while everyone's asleep, covering everything in silence until it's too late to shovel the truth out. I didn't set out to prove anything, but sometimes life brings a moment where all you've given, all you've quietly held together, demands to be seen. And I was about to find out just how quickly a child can forget, especially when $10 million are at stake. The first sign that something had changed was the shoes. Daniel came home wearing a brand new pair of leather boots, sleek, polished, the kind that didn't belong on the feet of someone who hadn't paid the water bill in 2 months. He kicked them off by the door like they were nothing, like he'd worn them for years, and muttered something about catching up with a buddy from high school. I didn't ask where they came from. I just stared at them while I peeled potatoes over the sink. 2 days later, a new watch. The next week, a gold chain, just thin enough to pass for subtle but shiny enough to whisper money. And then came the subtle things. He stopped joining us for dinner, started skipping breakfast, left early, came home late, always on the phone, whispering, pacing, laughing too loud at things that used to barely get a smirk. One night, I was folding laundry in the boys' room and noticed a whiff of cologne I didn't recognize. Something expensive. I tried not to overthink it. Maybe he got a raise, maybe he finally found direction. But mothers notice patterns the world ignores. We know the rhythm of our children, their pauses, their moods, the way their silence shifts when they're hiding something. Daniel's silence had changed. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was smug, and I felt it like cold air leaking through a closed window. Quiet, but inescapable. I remember this one moment so clearly. I was making tea in the kitchen one afternoon. The sun was warm through the curtain, the kids were out back, and I was humming that old Patsy Cline song that always makes me feel like my younger self. Daniel walked in, dropped the monthly envelope of paid bills on the table without a word, grabbed a protein bar, and turned to leave. Before he could, I asked, "Everything go through okay this month?" He paused, eyes flicking toward the envelope. "Yeah, all good." Then he was gone. No smile, no, "Thanks, Mom." Just the back of his new jacket disappearing down the hallway. I picked up the envelope, lighter than usual. Inside, a few receipts, electricity, water, gas. But the lottery ticket, the one I had folded and tucked in with the stack, it wasn't there. Now, before anyone jumps to conclusions, let me ask you this, from one woman to another. Have you ever felt something was off, but told yourself to stop being paranoid? You wanted so badly to be wrong that you convinced yourself to stay quiet? Because that's what I did. I stood there holding the envelope like it might speak. Like maybe the ticket was just stuck between the papers. Like maybe Daniel had forgotten to return it by accident. I didn't confront him. Not because I was scared, but because I was tired of being the one always asking the uncomfortable questions. And honestly, part of me just didn't want to know. That week, I started noticing how little Daniel mentioned me when he was around his new crowd. A woman named Jamie started coming by. Young, stylish, all perfume and fast smiles. Daniel introduced her as a friend, but I knew better. She laughed too loud at his jokes, touched his arm when she thought no one was watching, and the way she looked at me, like I was something stuck to the furniture, like I didn't belong in my own home. Once I offered her a slice of pie. She smiled politely and said, "Oh, I didn't know you still cooked." Still? I pretended not to hear it, just like I pretended not to notice how Daniel started correcting the boys when they called me Mama Mar, insisting they use grandma like it was more distant, less attached. He wasn't just pulling away, he was rewriting the story. At this point in the story, I wonder if any of you watching have ever experienced this quiet kind of erasure. The moment your child stops seeing you as home and starts seeing you as a hurdle. If you have, I see you. And if you haven't, count your blessings and hold your babies close while they still remember who held them first. One night, I couldn't sleep. My chest was tight, not from illness, but from something deeper, like my heart knew it was being pushed out before my body did. I got up, walked quietly to the kitchen, and opened the junk drawer where I kept spare pens, rubber bands, and old receipts. I flipped through the stack, grocery lists, bank slips, a note from the boys, but no ticket, not even the magnet I used to pin it to the fridge. Gone. That was when it hit me. He knew. He had seen it, remembered it, and taken it. Quietly, deliberately. And suddenly, all the signs that I had been ignoring weren't quiet anymore. They were deafening. I didn't expect the knock on the door to change everything. It was a Tuesday morning, gray skies, quiet house, the kind of day that feels like nothing important could happen. Daniel showed up in a crisp white button-down I'd never seen before. Hair slicked back, smelled like some expensive cologne, the kind that arrives in a box with tissue paper. He wasn't alone. A woman stepped out of the car behind him, tall, confident, red lipstick that said, "Don't mess with me," before she even spoke. She didn't look at me, just stood there with her arms crossed, like she was waiting for someone to move out of her house. My hands were still damp from washing dishes. I dried them on a towel and opened the door. Daniel didn't hug me, didn't smile. He just said, "We need to talk." He led me outside into the driveway like I was a tenant being evicted. "I've decided to move out," he said. I blinked. "All right, I can pack the boys' things this weekend if you want." His jaw tightened. "No, Mom. I mean, I'm moving out. With Jamie. Into our new place." He paused, then looked away. "It's already done. We signed papers yesterday." My heart thumped once, hard, and then went still. "You bought a house?" He nodded, almost proud. "It's a good investment. Big backyard, pool, close to the schools." I wanted to ask how. I wanted to scream, with what money? But instead I said, "So, it'll just be me and the boys here?" That's when he dropped the second blow. "No," he said, "they're coming with me." I stood there, staring at my son, my only son, trying to make sense of what he'd just said. "You're taking them?" My voice cracked. "They're my kids, Mom." "I raised them," I whispered. "I know," he said, but he didn't sound sorry. "But it's time for things to change. For all of us." I looked at Jamie. Her expression didn't budge. She didn't care what I'd sacrificed. Didn't know how many nights I stayed up with fevers and nightmares while Daniel was out finding himself. He cleared his throat. "Look, Jamie and I, we need space, privacy, a fresh start." "And me?" I asked. Daniel hesitated. Then, so casually it nearly broke me, he said, "You've lived here long enough. It's time you figure things out too." He handed me an envelope. Inside, a one-way bus ticket to a town 3 hours away and a pamphlet for a senior living facility. Not a hug, not a farewell dinner, just printed paper and a goodbye he didn't even say out loud. I didn't cry, not then. My pride wouldn't let me. "I'll come back for the boys' things tomorrow," he said. "Try to have your stuff packed too." Then he turned and walked away. Jamie gave me a nod, not of respect, but dismissal, as if to say, "You've been replaced." That night, it rained. Not the kind of rain that comforts you. It was sharp, cold, and mean, like it knew what happened and wanted to soak it in. I stood on the porch with a suitcase Daniel didn't even help me carry. It burst open when I stepped off the stoop, landing hard on the concrete. Underwear, socks, a faded nightgown. My toothbrush rolled into the gutter. Daniel didn't flinch. He was already backing out of the driveway in his new car. I stood there drenched, mascara running, hair plastered to my scalp, and I realized something brutal and honest. He hadn't just moved out. He'd thrown me away. The boys weren't home. Thank God. I don't think I could have survived them watching me like that. He didn't even leave a blanket. No goodbye note. Just the echo of "you're no longer needed" ringing in my ears. That night, I lay awake on the couch. No pillow, no heat. Just an old fleece jacket draped over my shoulders like a memory I couldn't shake. I stared at the ceiling, tracing the same cracked line I'd painted over years ago, back when this house still felt like family. I kept replaying it all, over and over, how I held him through panic attacks, how I canceled my own appointments to drive him to job interviews, how I sold my anniversary ring to pay off his third missed car payment. And now I was a ghost in a home I'd built. If you've ever been discarded like that by someone you raised, someone who once needed you for everything, then you know the kind of pain I'm talking about. It doesn't explode. It lingers. It hums in your ribs and stings behind your eyes and settles into your bones like cold air. It's the pain of being erased. Later that week, I walked past a neighbor's house. Her granddaughter was visiting, laughing as she helped rake the leaves. I smiled politely and waved. She didn't wave back. I wasn't just thrown out of my son's life. I was slowly fading from everyone's. The silence after he left didn't feel like peace. It felt like absence, like something had been torn out of the house and left a cold, aching shape behind. The boys' laughter, gone. The mess in the hallway, The cartoons always one notch too loud, the clutter of a home that felt lived in, all of it vanished in a single day. The house was still full of furniture, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a waiting room. I didn't cry the next morning. I didn't even speak. I just sat at the kitchen table with my lukewarm coffee, staring at the mug across from me, the one that used to be Daniel's. It still had the chip on the rim. I hadn't thrown it out because, I don't know, maybe I thought some things mattered even if they were a little broken, but he didn't. I checked my phone, out of habit, not hope. Still nothing. No calls, no messages. Not from Daniel, not from the boys. He hadn't even let me say goodbye. Just took them like they were furniture. Packed them into a new life. Left me behind like clutter he was tired of stepping over. I tried texting. Let me know if they need anything. No reply. Tell them Grandma loves them. Still nothing. A few days later, I logged into Facebook. I hadn't touched it in months, but something pulled me there. Like pain wanting to prove itself. There he was, Daniel, smiling in front of a huge white house with columns and a wraparound porch, holding up a glass of champagne like a trophy. Caption, "New beginnings, we made it." Dozens of likes, hearts, cheers, and not a single mention of me. No thanks, Mom. No, we did it. Not even a passing word about the woman who gave him everything he needed to survive long enough to have this so-called new beginning. He didn't just walk away. He erased me. Photo after photo, it was like watching my life being rewritten by someone else's hand. Daniel at a rooftop bar, Daniel at a dealership, Daniel poolside with Jamie in a white bikini and those giant sunglasses like some Hollywood starlet. The boys were in some pictures. At first, then less. One photo, then none. I clicked through comments. Old classmates, cousins who hadn't spoken to us in years. Proud of you, man. You deserve it. No more dead weight, huh? Dead weight. I read that one twice. Then again, they were talking about me. You know, there's a certain kind of heartbreak that doesn't scream. It just folds itself quietly and hides behind your ribs. That's the kind I carried. I stopped checking my phone after that. Stopped looking at photos. Stopped expecting anything. The house stayed quiet. I cooked less. Ate less. Slept with the TV on just so it didn't feel like the walls were breathing. I wasn't just alone. I was invisible. A week later, I walked into town to get milk and stamps. Ben, the cashier at the corner store, smiled like usual. "Hey there, Miss Martha," he said. "Haven't seen you in a while." I nodded, too tired to smile back. But before I could say anything, he added, "Saw Daniel on the news last night. You must be proud." I froze. "What?" He pointed toward the tiny TV above the register. Local story. Single dad wins big. Says he's going to invest in the community. Single dad. The words hit harder than I expected. He'd cut me from his life so completely, he was pretending I never existed. Pretending I wasn't part of the years that came before the money. He wasn't just living without me. He was building a whole new world, one where I'd never mattered. That night, I pulled out a photo album. Not the one with weddings and holidays. The one I kept hidden in the hallway closet, full of small, quiet things. Daniel's first drawing, the receipt from his first soccer cleats, a note he wrote me in second grade. "Mom, I love you the most, don't die." I ran my fingers over that crayon handwriting and felt like I was holding a ghost. Where did that little boy go, and why was I the only one who missed him? Some people grieve the dead. I was grieving the living. By the end of that week, I stopped checking the mail. I already knew what was coming. The bills Daniel used to cover with my pension, the shut-off notices, the silence. He took everything, my grandsons, my home, even the smallest hope that one day I'd be seen again. And in that stillness, something broke, but not in the way you think. I didn't shatter. I shed, like old skin. I was starting to see something beneath the grief. A quiet line of steel. It didn't come like a lightning strike. No, my realization came quietly, like most painful truths do. Not in one single explosive moment, but in 100 small silences strung together like lights that suddenly flickered off one by one. The first was when I found his mug. You remember that chipped coffee mug I mentioned? The one he used every morning, always sitting beside mine? I was cleaning out the cabinet, mostly to keep my hands busy, when I noticed it was gone. At first, I thought maybe I'd misplaced it, but no, it was missing. Just like his sweatshirt, his shoes by the back door, the boys' drawings on the fridge. He hadn't just taken the children. He'd taken everything that proved we'd lived as a family. It was like I'd been erased from the story altogether. Then came the grocery list. I'd written it out the way I always did. Pen on a torn envelope, chicken scratch notes about milk, bread, apples, oatmeal, toothpaste. But halfway through the list, I just stopped. I stared at the paper and realized no one was going to drink the milk. No one was going to eat the oatmeal. The little mouths I'd been feeding were gone. What was the point? I folded the paper and slid it into the drawer. Left the house with no list, no energy, just a half-empty purse and a heart that felt like a hollowed-out church. But the moment, the real moment, came on a Thursday morning, early. The kind of cold that wraps around your bones before you even step outside. I was walking past the fridge when I noticed something. The magnet, a bright yellow smiley face. I'd had it for years. One of the grandkids had given it to me from a dentist's office prize box. It used to hold up coupons, drawings, bills, reminders. But now, it held nothing. Just a bright, stupid smile stuck to a fridge that didn't feel like mine anymore. And that's when I remembered. The ticket. The one I'd tucked inside the April envelope. I walked back to my bedroom and opened the desk drawer where I kept my copies of everything. Bills, lists, handwritten notes. And there it was. A grocery receipt from that week, same date as the envelope, with a quick scrawl in the margin. Don't forget an added lottery ticket for fun. I had written it. I had paid for it. I had given it to Daniel. Tucked inside the envelope he never gave back. The blood drained from my face. He didn't just accidentally take that ticket. He had opened the envelope, seen it, recognized it, and said nothing. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. I sat down at the kitchen table. My knees were trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of the truth finally settling on my shoulders. All those years of me making excuses for him. He's tired. He doesn't mean it. He's just overwhelmed. He'll grow out of it. All those stories I'd told myself so I wouldn't have to face the truth. That my son didn't just forget me. He chose not to see me. And you know what the cruelest part is? It wasn't the money. It wasn't the house. Or the lies. Or even the fact that he took the kids without a goodbye. It was that he didn't think I was worth even a conversation. He didn't think I was smart enough to notice, or brave enough to question it, or strong enough to fight back. And for a long time, maybe he was right. But sitting there staring at that stupid magnet and the blank space it held, something inside me shifted. I wasn't crying anymore. I wasn't begging for answers. I wasn't chasing scraps of kindness from someone who'd already made up their mind about me. I was just done. Not bitter, not hateful, just done. And in that space, where all the pain used to live, something else began to grow, resolve. He thought I wouldn't notice. He thought I'd sit here, small and quiet, while he rewrote our story and cast himself as the self-made hero. But he forgot something. I raised him. I know how he thinks. And more importantly, I know the truth. And that's where every good revenge story begins, not with anger, but with clarity. I didn't storm into his mansion, didn't bang on the gates or demand answers. I went to the store, the same corner store where I bought milk, paper towels, and birthday cards, the one with the flickering open sign and the friendly cashier, Ben, who always remembered my name. That morning, I walked in slower than usual. My hands trembled a little, not from fear, but from clarity. "Hey there, Miss Martha," Ben said, smiling. "Back for the usual?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stepped closer to the counter and said quietly, "Do you remember the Monday I came in and bought a lottery ticket? Right after getting groceries?" He raised an eyebrow, then squinted. "You mean the one where you joked about buying a beach house and leaving the dishes behind?" I nodded. "That's the one." He went still for a moment, then leaned in, voice dropping. "You saying that was your ticket?" I didn't speak. I just pulled a folded paper from my coat pocket, a copy of the receipt. Same day, same time, same ticket number. Ben looked down at it, then back up at me. "Well, I'll be damned." I took a breath. "Would you be willing to check the security footage from that day?" "Yeah," he said slowly. "Yeah, I think we can do that." 15 minutes later, we were in the back office, hunched over a tiny monitor that smelled like old coffee and cardboard. The footage was grainy, but there I was, clear as day, handing over a $5 bill, buying groceries, then reaching for a lottery ticket. I saw myself pull out a pen from my purse. I saw myself write something. Ben zoomed in on the frame. My name, scrawled in that familiar shaky cursive on the back of the ticket. I covered my mouth, not from shock, but from quiet confirmation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't making it up. I wasn't just an old woman with a bad memory. And to the folks watching this, especially the mothers, grandmothers, the women who've spent a lifetime holding a family together with duct tape and prayer, have you ever had a moment where you realized you were right? Not out of pride, but out of survival? Because that's what this was. I wasn't trying to win. I was just trying not to disappear. Later that day, I called the state lottery office. I told them everything. Where I bought the ticket, the date, that it was in my name, that I had the receipt, the video, and even a note I'd written that week, confirming I'd placed it in the April envelope for my son. They paused, then asked me to email everything. "We'll open an investigation," the woman said. "If it checks out, we can take action." "Can you freeze the payout?" I asked. "If the evidence is strong enough," she said. "Yes." I hung up, my hands still shaking slightly, and sat in my kitchen. Same chair, same chipped tile, same broken clock on the wall, but everything felt different. Not new, not victorious, just real. For the first time in weeks, I felt my breath settle. I didn't call Daniel, didn't warn him, didn't ask for anything. Because the truth was, I didn't need him to admit what he'd done. I just needed to reclaim what was mine. And in doing so, I was reclaiming me. A few days later, I met with a lawyer, Dana. She was sharp, calm, the kind of woman who didn't blink when I told her my story. "This isn't just fraud," she said, flipping through my documents. "It's theft, and you have a case." "I don't want revenge," I told her. "I just want my name back." She nodded. "Then we'll start there." We submitted everything that afternoon. By the end of the week, the lottery office confirmed the payout was frozen. The claim was under investigation. Daniel no longer had access to the money. Still, I said nothing. No texts, no confrontations, because when you've been cast aside so easily, you stop asking for explanations. You just build your foundation in silence and let the truth do what screaming never could. That night, I lit a candle in the living room. Not for prayer, not even for peace, just to remind myself that I was still here, still solid, still worthy of light. When the letter came from the Lottery Commission, I didn't rush to open it. I just stood there for a moment, holding the envelope in my hands, listening to the silence of the house. No voices, no cartoons playing, no footsteps running down the hallway. Just me and the ticking of the kitchen clock that hadn't kept perfect time since 1998. I opened it slowly. One careful tear at the top, slid out the paper. The investigation was officially underway. The payout to Daniel was frozen. A formal review had begun to determine the rightful owner. I read it twice, then set it on the counter and made a cup of tea, because that's what you do when the world finally starts listening. You stay calm. You stay standing. I didn't tell anyone. Not my neighbor who used to whisper, "He's lucky to have you." Not my old church friend who saw the article online and texted, "Is that your Daniel?" Not even Ben, the cashier, who had helped me pull the security footage. Because this wasn't a story for the world just yet. It was mine. and I needed to hold it close while it was still becoming something real. For the first time in weeks, I slept. Not the kind of half sleep where your body rests, but your mind paces back and forth all night. Real sleep, deep, heavy. The kind that feels like forgiveness, not from someone else, but from yourself. I woke early the next morning, made oatmeal just for me, and watched the sun filter through the dusty blinds like it had been waiting for me to notice it again. The phone buzzed a few times. I didn't check it. I knew what it was. Emails from the attorney, automatic updates from the lottery system, maybe even some banking notices I'd been avoiding. But none of it needed a reaction just yet, because the truth was finally walking toward me, and it was doing just fine without my shouting. I think people assume that when you decide to take something back, your dignity, your voice, your story, you have to do it loudly. But they're wrong. Sometimes power looks like silence. Sometimes it sounds like no response. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not run toward a fight, but step back and let someone else trip over their own lies. A few days later, Dana, my attorney, called to say the commission had acknowledged my proof as compelling and credible. Her words, not mine. She asked if I wanted to prepare a public statement, maybe even a press appearance. I said no, not yet. Not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't interested in being seen, not in the way Daniel had been, posing on rooftops, wearing designer suits he didn't even know how to pronounce. I didn't want applause. I wanted closure. And you can't buy that with headlines. Instead, I went for a walk, passed by a bakery I hadn't visited in years, bought a single muffin, blueberry still warm. I sat on a bench and ate it slowly, watching people move through the world like nothing had happened. And maybe, to them, nothing had. But for me, everything had changed, because I was no longer the woman waiting for someone to choose me. I had chosen myself. And if you're listening to this right now, if you've ever been overlooked, forgotten, dismissed, let me say this clearly. You don't need an apology to rebuild. You don't need permission to heal. And you sure as hell don't need to wait for someone to validate the truth you already know. The next week, I signed the official affidavit with Dana. She smiled at me as I passed her the pen. You know, she said, most people want revenge. I don't, I told her. I want my name back. And I meant it, because this was never about the money. It was about being seen again. After so many years of holding everything together in silence, only to be thrown aside like an old coat that didn't fit anymore. Daniel still didn't know. He was still posting pictures, drinks, dinners, selfies with people he hadn't spoken to since high school, still pretending. But I didn't comment, didn't correct him, didn't even send a warning, because that's the thing about truth. It doesn't knock. It walks right in when the lies get tired. I didn't know the exact moment it happened, but I felt it, like the way you feel the temperature drop before a storm hits. Quiet, subtle, but real. One morning, I was rinsing out a teacup when I noticed my phone buzzing more than usual. Emails, notifications, legal updates. Then came the call from Dana. They've made their ruling, she said. They're siding with you. Your documentation, the footage, the signed ticket. It's all been validated. I didn't say anything right away. I just sat down, slowly, one hand still damp from the dishwater. Dana continued, calm and steady. The payout under Daniel's name has been revoked. Your name is now the legal claimant on file. The commission will be making a correction publicly. I looked at the calendar. Just another Tuesday. But everything had changed. Not with an explosion, not with a courtroom battle or some grand reckoning. Just paper, time, and truth doing what they always do when you give them space. Daniel didn't call, but I knew the moment the banks notified him, because all of a sudden his social media went quiet. No more posts about luxury life, no champagne glasses, no poolside selfies with tag winning. Just silence. And silence, for someone like Daniel, is louder than screaming. I imagined him trying to pay for something, maybe a boutique shopping spree or an overpriced dinner. Card declined. Try again. Declined. Check the app. Frozen. That smugness, the one I knew so well, would have started to crumble. Not because he was afraid, but because the illusion was breaking, and he had no script for that. You know, when someone builds their world on a lie, it doesn't take a wrecking ball to bring it down. All it takes is for one truth to stand still. And I had been still for a long, long time. That afternoon, I went for a walk around the block, not for any reason, just to breathe. I passed by the grocery store, the park, the library where I used to take the boys for story hour. The world felt different, not because it had changed, but because I finally had space in it again. I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't asking for permission to exist. I was just walking, upright, present. 2 days later, my neighbor Lila stopped by with a casserole dish. She didn't mention the headlines, though I knew she'd seen them. She just smiled and said, "You've always been too good for how they treated you." It wasn't a compliment. It was a reckoning, a quiet recognition of something that had gone unseen for too long. I thanked her, warmed the food, ate slowly. It tasted like coming home. Later that evening, I checked Daniel's page, just once, still blank. But in the comments of his last post, still visible, someone had written, "Didn't the news say that ticket wasn't even his?" Another comment underneath, "Wow, used your own mother?" Then, "No wonder he disappeared." I closed the app, not with satisfaction, but with relief, because the part of me that had once begged to be understood no longer needed to be. To the women listening who've been told to stay quiet, to let it go, to be the bigger person. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes silence is the stage you give the truth to speak. And when it doesn't whisper. It echoes. I didn't make a statement, didn't go on TV, didn't share the ruling with the world. I didn't need the crowd to know what I already did, that I wasn't just the mother behind the man. I was the woman who held the ground he walked on. And now that ground had shifted. That night, I lit the porch light, not for Daniel, not for the boys, for myself, because I was no longer sitting in the dark, waiting for someone to open a door. I had already opened my own. 3 days after the ruling, he finally called. I knew it was him before I even looked at the screen. The phone vibrated in that urgent, chaotic way, like it had been forced to ring by sheer panic. I didn't pick up, not at first. I let it buzz. Let it go to voicemail, let him sit in the silence he'd once left me in. But he kept calling, again and again. Eventually I answered, not out of curiosity, but because I was ready, not for a fight, not for a confession, just to listen. His voice was tight, clipped, the way a person sounds when the walls start closing in and they're still trying to pretend it's fine. "Mom," he snapped, "you need to talk to someone. I don't know what you told them, but my accounts are frozen. They're saying the ticket wasn't mine." I stayed quiet. He kept going. "My lawyer says they're siding with you, but that's crazy. That ticket came from the house, from our house. It was in my hands." Still, I said nothing. Because sometimes silence is the most honest response. Finally, he exploded. "You're ruining everything. You humiliated me. What do you even want from me?" That was the moment I spoke, not loudly, not angrily, just enough. "I want you to stop pretending I never existed." There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end, like someone who just realized the map they'd been following led them straight into a dead end. "You don't understand," he said, softer now. "I needed that money. I built a life around it." "No," I said. "You built a lie around it, and now it's crumbling." He scoffed. "So that's it? You're just going to take everything?" "I didn't take anything," I told him. "I took back what was already mine." He didn't respond after that. I heard the click of the call ending. Not a goodbye, not even an insult, just a retreat. The sound of a man who finally realized the world wasn't going to spin for him anymore. The next morning, I went to the market, bought apples, whole wheat bread, some honey. As I was paying, I overheard a woman at the next register say, "Did you hear about that guy? The one who claimed he won the lottery, but it turned out to be his mother's ticket?" The cashier chuckled. "Serves him right. Can't just cut out your mama and expect blessings to stick." I didn't say a word, just slipped the receipt into my purse and walked out into the sun. To the women watching this, Have you ever been blamed for someone else's downfall simply because you finally told the truth? Let me tell you something. That's not your guilt to carry. People don't fall because you told the truth. They fall because they stood on lies. Daniel didn't show up at my door. Not right away, but I knew he would. Because when the applause dies down, when the money dries up, and the people who came for the champagne stop answering your calls, they always remember the quiet one they thought would never fight back. It was a Saturday when it happened. I was folding towels when I heard the knock. 3 times. Firm, but not angry. I opened the door and saw him. Hair unkempt, shirt wrinkled, eyes darker than I'd ever seen them. "Can we talk?" he asked. I didn't answer, just stepped aside and let him in. He sat at the table, not the way he used to, sprawled out, careless, but small, guarded, like someone visiting a stranger's house. He didn't start with an apology, he started with a question. "What do you want from me?" I looked at him for a long time before replying. "I want you to know that love isn't silence, and silence isn't weakness." He swallowed hard. "So, are you going to give it back? The money?" I smiled, gently, not cruelly. "I've already given half away." He froze. "What?" "To shelters, single mothers, women who don't have anyone left." "You're serious?" "I'm peaceful." He didn't yell, didn't cry, just sat there, staring at a version of me he'd never cared to know, the version that didn't beg, the version that didn't bend, the version that had always been there. Quiet, steady, and finally done being invisible. When he stood to leave, he looked like a man walking away from rubble, because that's what happens when your world is built on someone else's bones. It eventually falls, and this time, I wasn't the one left in the dust. He came back 2 days later. This time, he didn't knock like a man desperate. He knocked like a child who wasn't sure if he was still welcome. I opened the door and looked at him. Daniel. Same brown eyes, same jawline that used to tense up whenever he was told no. But something was different now. He looked smaller. Not physically, but in presence. Like life had finally shown him a mirror and he didn't quite recognize what he saw. "Can I come in?" he asked, voice low. I didn't speak. I just stepped aside. He sat down at the kitchen table, my kitchen table, where I used to lay out birthday cakes, school permission slips, and soup on sick days. It was quiet for a long while. Finally, he cleared his throat. "I lost everything." I nodded. Not unkindly, just knowingly. "I don't know how to fix this," he said. And there it was, the line I used to wait years to hear. Back when I thought that if I just gave a little more, stayed a little longer, he might see me, understand me, appreciate me. But I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel angry. I just felt done. "You don't have to fix anything," I said. He looked up, confused. "I don't?" "No," I said quietly. "Because I already did." He blinked, unsure what that meant. I leaned back in the chair. "I fixed the part of me that thought I had to earn your love. I let it go." He dropped his gaze. The silence between us wasn't heavy. It wasn't bitter. It just was. "I know I messed up," he muttered. "I know I hurt you." I didn't correct him. He didn't mess up. He made choices, repeated ones, but I didn't say it out loud. I didn't need to. "I'm trying," he said. "I want to do better." "I hope you do," I answered. "But you'll have to do it without me." His eyes snapped up. "What do you mean?" "I mean this cycle, where I forgive and you forget, it ends here." You see, to the women listening who've poured themselves out until the pitcher was dry, you don't owe anyone your healing just because they finally noticed the wound. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. He looked stunned. Not because I was cruel, but because I wasn't. Because I wasn't trying to guilt him or shame him or lecture him. I was simply done. And sometimes the cleanest goodbyes are the ones that come without a speech. "I'm leaving town," I said after a long moment. He frowned. "To where? Does it matter?" He shook his head slowly. "Guess not." I stood and walked over to the drawer by the fridge. I pulled out an envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "It's a transfer form," I said. "I've already donated most of the winnings, but what's left I put in a fund for your son. College, therapy, whatever he needs someday." Daniel looked at it like it was foreign. "You do that?" he asked, bewildered. "I already did." He stood, slower this time, almost respectfully. He looked like he wanted to say something more, maybe ask for another chance. But I turned toward the window, the soft glow of evening settling in, and in that stillness, he seemed to understand. This wasn't a punishment. It wasn't a door slammed in his face. It was a goodbye, a real one. He walked out quietly, didn't look back, didn't slam the door, didn't ask for forgiveness he hadn't yet earned, and I didn't chase after him. Didn't cry, didn't whisper, "Please don't go," like I had so many times before, because this time, I was the one leaving. Later that night, I sat on the porch. The wind was soft, the sky clear. A peace I hadn't known in decades settled into my bones. I didn't know where life would take me next, but I knew one thing. I was no longer waiting at the door for love to return. I didn't go far, just far enough. A few towns over, I rented a small cottage with creaky floorboards and ivy crawling up one side, the kind of place where the neighbors waved but didn't ask too many questions, where no one knew who had or hadn't won the lottery. It was perfect. I spent the first week doing nothing. No spreadsheets, no appointments, no expectations. I watered plants I didn't know the names of, sat on the porch swing with a blanket and watched the sky change colors, listened to birds that didn't care about human messes, and for the first time in years, my silence wasn't heavy. It wasn't lonely. It was mine. There's something sacred about living without a title. Not mom, not widow, not ex-wife, just Martha. Not even Ms. Just Martha. And I liked her. She didn't try to prove anything. She didn't ask for anyone's permission to be whole. I started keeping a journal. Not the kind I used to fill with lists and reminders, but a real one, where I wrote things like, "I woke up and didn't feel dread. I smiled today and no one needed it from me. The tea was strong, so am I." Small things, but when you've been erased slowly for years, small things feel like resurrection. I joined a knitting group, not because I loved knitting, I was average at best, but because they laughed about ordinary things, burned cookies, loud birds, husbands who snored. No one asked me what I used to be. They only cared if I wanted lemon or chamomile. It was exactly what I needed. To those of you watching, especially the women who've spent years taking care of everyone but themselves, tell me in the comments, when was the last time you asked yourself, what do I want just for me? Not for the kids, not for the house, not for peacekeeping, just you. Because I didn't know either. But now I do. I wanted slow mornings, books with bent pages, walks where no one asked me where I was going. I wanted space to grow things, not just flowers, but dreams I had buried so deep I forgot they had roots. One afternoon, I drove to a bookstore and wandered the aisles like I was in a cathedral. No rush, no noise. I picked up a used copy of The Secret Garden. The spine was cracked, the pages yellowed, but it felt right, because I was learning how to tend my own garden again, one stubborn weed at a time. A letter came from Daniel in week 3. Just my name on the front, no return address, just Martha. Inside was one sentence. I don't expect a reply. I just wanted to say I finally understand. I folded it once, put it in a drawer, not to treasure, not to reread, just to acknowledge. Sometimes people grow quietly too, and while I wasn't waiting for his change, I could still honor it, from a distance. I didn't feel a rush of forgiveness. I didn't cry. I just made tea, swept the porch, tended to my tomatoes, because the best version of revenge is not bitterness. It's becoming someone so full of life again there's no room left for what tried to break you. Some nights I still sit on the porch and watch the stars. I wonder how many women like me are out there, starting over in silence, unseen, but not unloved, because love starts here, inside, with the way we treat ourselves when no one's watching. I don't know if I'll ever go back. to the old house, the old neighborhood, the people who once looked through me like I was glass. But I don't need to, because this quiet, sturdy life I'm building, it's enough. The seasons passed without ceremony. Spring softened into summer. Tomatoes ripened on the vine. The porch swing squeaked a little louder in the evenings. I stopped counting days, stopped looking back. Life had become something quiet and warm, like an old song you don't even realize you're humming until someone asks what it is. One afternoon, I was planting marigolds along the front path when a silver sedan pulled into the gravel drive. A woman stepped out, late 30s maybe, clean blazer, nervous hands. She walked up the path, holding something to her chest. "Mrs. Walters?" she asked. I straightened slowly. That was my name. Once. She smiled gently. "I'm Lily. I work with the State Media Bureau. Do you mind if I sit with you a moment?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Sure, I've got coffee on." We sat on the porch, the breeze light through the trees. She reached into her bag and pulled out a slim folder. "There's a story circulating again," she began, "about the woman who quietly reclaimed a lottery ticket, didn't press charges, didn't speak to the press, just walked away." I sipped my coffee. Some stories don't need telling. She smiled, except they do, especially when the ending is quiet. She asked if I'd be open to a small feature, not a big interview, not television, just a column in a community magazine about strength, dignity, and reclaiming your story. I told her I'd think about it. Then I handed her a tomato from the basket at my feet, still warm from the sun. A week later, the article came in the mail. The title said simply, "She never raised her voice, but she changed everything." It wasn't flashy. No photos, no dramatic headline, just the story of a woman who had once been erased and wrote herself back in. And I didn't feel exposed. I felt seen. After that, small letters trickled in. From women, from daughters, even from a few grown sons. I watched my mother give and never get thanks, until I saw what that does to someone. My grandmother raised 3 kids and never got her name on the deed. Your silence reminded me that sometimes quiet women are the loudest in the end. I didn't reply to all of them, but I read every word, and in each one, I saw a part of me, reaching across time and distance, saying, "You mattered, even if no one ever told you so." Then one morning I got a postcard from Daniel, just 5 words. He asks about you often. No signature, no plea, just acknowledgement. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't cry, I didn't call, but I placed it gently inside my journal, next to the old grocery receipt, the folded lottery claim, and a photo of a little boy in overalls holding my hand. I don't know if I'll see them again, and that's okay, because sometimes the most sacred recognition doesn't happen in public. It happens when someone whispers your name years later, this time with reverence. And sometimes the only justice you need is knowing they remember, even when you no longer need them to. To the women listening, especially those who felt invisible, maybe your story won't end in an apology. Maybe they'll never say thank you, but you can still stand, still breathe, still live a life that honors everything you gave, even when no one clapped for you. I sit on the porch now, older and softer, but not smaller, because I didn't win through revenge. I didn't rise through rage. I simply outlasted the lie. And in doing so, I became the truth. And now that you've heard my story, tell me in the comments, what would your silent victory look like? Not the kind with fireworks or applause, but the kind where you finally breathe easy and know that you were always enough.